Oftentimes, I like to say that you need to get your ducks in a row before you go down this path. So if it's your idea about getting a divorce, I would be having a conversation with an attorney. It's hard to say who's first, right? And on the one hand, I'd like to meet with the person to give them the questions to ask their attorney so that I have that information when they come back. Oftentimes people, well, just kind of understanding, hey, we've been married for 20 plus years. We have children. We have assets that we've accumulated during our marriage. What can I expect that will be the outcome? Am I entitled to half of everything? Am I entitled to 30%?
Welcome to the Heartbreak to Happiness Show with Sara Davison. If you're struggling with a breakup and you feel shocked, angry, betrayed, devastated, or sad and alone, then this podcast is for you. Best-selling author and award-winning host Sara Davison shares how you too can get on with your life to heal, grow, and move from heartbreak to happiness. Here's your host, Sara Davison.
Welcome back to the show. Now today I am super excited because my guest is Jennifer Lee, who is the founder of Modern Wealth and is here to talk to us all about finance when you're going through a divorce or a breakup. Now we know that one of the biggest reasons people get divorced is because of finances. Now Jennifer has almost 30 years of experience in the financial services industry and has found that a relationship with a financial advisor is most critical at the intersections in life where emotions collide with financial events, which is exactly what happens with a divorce. So welcome, Jennifer, to the show.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me, Sarah.
I'm very excited because I know this is something that's going to resonate with a lot of my listeners. Tell us a little bit about the work that you do, Jennifer.
Sure. So I grew up loving money, understanding money. And so I got into the wealth management business. My father was in the business, and I originally started in the industry in accounting. And one day he said, "Hey, I've got an option here. I can bring you in. Are you interested?" And well, I jumped. I didn't know what I was getting into, but I've been doing it for quite a long time since then. So, I grew up with a comfort level around money. So I work primarily I find that it ends up being with the non-moneyed party. My clients will refer to themselves as an ostrich when it comes to finance and talking about planning for retirement and budgeting and cash flow and investments. They don't really have an interest in it. Doesn't mean they're not capable. It's just not their aptitude. So because I have a comfort level with it, we work with people who are going through divorce and really try to make sure that they don't leave money on the table, try to make sure that they make good decisions. It's more money is a tool, I see, versus a commodity. Money allows you different lifestyle choices. It helps you facilitate your dreams, but it isn't just about the cash, right? It's about what it can do for you in your life. And so we try to help people figure that out.
Okay, I love that. And I think there's definitely usually one side of a divorce who really has very little information about the finances. I see that a lot. And sometimes it's just because it's not their thing, that they haven't been particularly interested in it. And they'd left that, as you divide chores during a marriage, some people, are very traditional in the way they do that. Other people not so. But, whoever that job goes to is their job. And then somebody else is dealing with maybe the kids or the day-to-day running of the house. So that is quite common for people to split those roles. There's also the other side, I suppose, which is where there's a toxic relationship and you just don't really have any control over that because your partner has controlled that throughout the relationship. So I guess there's two sides to the non-money. There's the healthy non-monied and then there's probably unhealthy, toxic relationship that's left you non-monied. Even if you wanted to be, you couldn't. Do you see both of those sides? And tell me a little bit about that.
I do see both of those sides. I would tell you that mostly it is the divide and conquer scenario we come across. So we have a lot of things we're trying to manage in our life and in our relationships. And when one person is better at something, I don't want to deal with the lawn, right? Like that's your job. So when we can divide and conquer the things that we're interested in, that's great. In any relationship, absolutely encourage whoever the non-moneyed party is. Sometimes it's the guy. Many times it's the woman. Sometimes it is the man in the relationship. At least once a year, when you meet with a financial professional, you need to attend that meeting because whether you understand all the components of the conversation, you are part of the team that is considering how you're going to deploy those assets, right? How much is for retirement? How much is for kids' education? How much is for a family vacation? How much is for emergency money? Those are pretty important decisions, and you actually probably know a lot more than you think you do, but you definitely need to be part of those conversations at least once a year. And then when it comes to, financial distrust and, toxicity around control issues around money, I mean, you're going to have that toxicity and control if that's part of the personality issue, probably in all realms of your world. But you need to understand, you need to understand what you're contending with as you go through a divorce. So if you've been together for a period of time and you've accumulated assets, we want to make sure that you get your fair share and don't be intimidated by your soon-to-be ex who's trying to control assets. Get your team in place.
Obviously, for somebody that is not, non-moneyed, as you call it, someone that doesn't really have much of a clue about it, getting a team in place, I guess, is key. Who needs to be on that team, and how do you select the team? Because you may well have someone you've worked with as during the marriage for a long period of time. But obviously, if you don't know much about it, they probably work more with your ex than with you. So how do you go about deciding on the team and who needs to be in the team?
That's a great question. I think when you're facilitating through a divorce, it takes a village or a very specific team. So you need your attorney, you need the legal counsel to understand what the expectations are and what you can actually anticipate what the law will provide, and to give you perspective and a path through that process. You need more than likely a divorce coach, or a therapist to help you stay on task, to help you navigate through that and make sure that, your emotions don't run amok, because it's a highly stressful time going through a big change like this. And you need somebody who you can rely on to help you see things clearly as possible. And then I think you need a financial person. So if you had a financial person that was with your ex, more than likely you're going to find somebody new. I mean, there are a few cases. I've had couples that have been my clients for a long time, and they're going through an amicable divorce, and I retain both clients, but that's not always what happens. Okay. So you need to find somebody who is going to help you understand what you have and then talk to you about what you want. So I like to say financial planning is simple, and my clients just kind of chuckle at me like, seriously, how is it simple? We're the non-money party. Why are you telling me it's easy? Well, it's just two components. Okay. So it's, what do you have? What's your income? What's your assets? What are your resources? Is there inheritance? Are there real estate properties? Are there business assets? Is there regular income coming in? Savings, investment accounts? And what do you want? Oftentimes, we can figure out what you have in a few minutes. We can talk through, okay, well, we have this property, we have this business, this is our income, here's our tax return. And then you have, what do you want? You're going through a divorce. What do you want? What is your life going to look like on the other side? Where do you want to live? What do you want for your kids? Do you want to work? Do you want to go back to school? What do you want? Our job as an advisor, well, through the divorce process, is to help make sure you've received your fair share, and then help you navigate how that money is going to translate in your new life. But also, our job in general as a financial professional is to help you use that money and those resources to accomplish what it is that you want. That's our whole job. That's what I mean when I say it's simple. What do you have and what do you want? And that's what we do.
Simple, but to the team. So having a financial planner on your team obviously is key. I think it's quite daunting for most people if they don't know much about money, because there's so many people out there saying, come and work with me, come and work with me. So before we get into working out what you have and what you want, how do you know that this person is the right person for you? Because obviously some people have, Donald Trump-like wealth, and some people, most of us, just have, your average normal wealth, and then, there's everything in between there. So what does that, how do you go about choosing? Is there a criteria that matches your level of income and living? How do you do that?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. I think you're right. It is intimidating. Just like I get intimidated when I think about having to hire an attorney, right? It's like, oh, that's going to be so expensive. Is it the right one? How do I figure out, I'm not wasting money? So I get that. In the financial world, it's similar. What we do in our firm, because we work so frequently with people who are going through transition, is, I'll get somebody to come to me and they'll say, oh, I need a financial plan, or I need this whole strategy. And I'll say, well, you probably do, but not right now. Like, what you need right now is triage. You need me to help you get through this divorce. Let's just get the bottom line, help you facilitate through and figure out what it's going to look like on the other side. After the divorce is over, we're going to dig really deep about your big picture plan. But right now, that's not really what you need. I mean, I could do it, but your time and energy and focus is not going to be there. So I do what I call a financial triage. So we help you sort out what your assets are, sort out what you're going to get, kind of think about, do I want the house? If I take the house, what does that look like? Because I'm missing other assets. If I take the retirement money and I'm not 59 and a half, or even if I am 59 and a half and one has taxable consequences and other assets are tax-free, understanding those differences. So during the divorce process, I think you need somebody who you're paying probably either a flat fee or for a couple hours of consultation during this process. And then if you like them, then you engage them to be an advisor later for the rest of your future.
So when you're going through the divorce process, as most people listening to this will be either about to or in the middle or having been through it, so we're all pretty familiar with what that entails from a emotional roller coaster perspective. But as from a financial perspective, what should we be thinking about and being careful about? Because if you haven't had much access to money, you might not know what you've got where, you might not know what bank accounts are there, you might have actually just had a joint account you've used and not have access to anything else. So what's your advice for somebody then going into that divorce process who doesn't have much information about their own finances? What would you say, Jennifer?
Well, first, I would say it depends on how amicable and how transparent or not your soon-to-be ex is. Oftentimes, I like to say that you need to get your ducks in a row before you go down this path. So if it's your idea about getting a divorce, I would be having a conversation with an attorney. It's hard to say who's first, right? And on the one hand, I'd like to meet with the person to give them the questions to ask their attorney so that I have that information when they come back. Oftentimes people, well, just kind of understanding, hey, we've been married for 20 plus years. We have children. We have assets that we've accumulated during our marriage. What can I expect that will be the outcome? Am I entitled to half of everything? Am I entitled to 30%? So we have parameters around where I can plan and say, well, this is what your life is going to look like if you get what we think is reasonable, right?
Don't know what they've got, are you going to be able to do that? Like you were saying, get your ducks in a row. What would that mean so that they have more information than before they announce the divorce or suggest the divorce?
Right. Well, you certainly know what properties you own, right? Where you're living. You have cars, you know what your spouse does for a living, you know what your income is. You might not know their exact income, but you know what they do professionally, so we can estimate what they make. If you can't get a copy of their their pay stub. Bank accounts, if you're on the joint bank account, you can look at deposits that are made into there. Today there are lots of accounts are online. So it used to be you just collect all your statements, right, that were in the house, and it would be a little bit easier. Now everything is like, electronic delivery, and you need two-factor authentication that goes to your spouse's cell phone. So that's not going to work. And then
we have to say here that there are laws in the UK that stop you from doing things like that. So accessing information that isn't yours, it would not be admissible in court in some cases. So again, I think that's something maybe just check with your attorney, because if you do, there was a case here where a lady broke into her husband's home office and broke it, and it was in their home, right? So technically whatever, and took information from that office, and because that was in his private space, it was disallowed in court. So I do think I mean, I know over here, I don't know about over there, but we do have to be careful about that. But this is interesting because as a coach, I can always say to my clients, do the digging up front, find out what you've got. But obviously, you don't necessarily want to tell your lawyer how and when you got that information, because they may say, well, I can't use it. So I guess going to somebody like you might be able to give them similar advice, as find out what you can beforehand, so that when you go into the process, it's not hidden or burnt or taken off site, or, difficult to access.
And maybe you can tell me, Sarah, in the US we do discovery, where you complete a marital balance sheet. So I would have to submit something, my spouse would have to submit something. Do you have the same thing in the UK?
Yeah, we call it a Form E over here. Yeah, yeah. But the challenges with that, if you don't put it on, then nobody knows. If you don't know it exists, how do you find it? That's always going to be the challenge. And I know a lot of my listeners are probably going, yes, that's happened to me. I didn't know. I mean, obviously we have forensic accountants who quite often get involved, and we've had them on the podcast as well, where they look at the bank accounts and say, well, hang on, there's a movement out into this account, and what's that account? And money's come in from this account that's not listed on the Form E. So there's ways of pulling the strings to unravel, more, but that's expensive. I mean, hiring a forensic accountant is very expensive.
Unfortunately, when you get into having to engage a forensic accountant, you're probably in a very litigious divorce, right? So, you could come to some basic agreements, have it be more mutual, and just divide assets and move on. Then there's in between where you have mediation. It's a little bit more tenuous, and then you get into this really contentious area where you're spending all kinds of money on attorneys and forensic accountants because there's businesses and people aren't being transparent, and it's really unfortunate, but there are ways to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah. So I guess where your focus tends to be then is mainly that the friendly, more amicable divorces where there is some transparency and everybody can see what's going on then. Am I correct with that?
Well, we work in all three of them. I'm not a forensic accountant by any means, but I do work with them. Usually I'm working with the client to figure out what their life is going to look like later and help them make decisions about which assets to keep. But, my preference is to have the divorce be more amicable or mediated.
Yeah. Now tell me then, so they've set up their team, you're part of the team. You're looking at what do you have, which I guess then at some point you can just, if they're amicable, that's pretty straightforward to find out. What do you want? I mean, I imagine that's quite hard to manage, because what people want and what they actually reality of what they can have is probably very different, right?
Oftentimes it is. So, and to be honest, it changes. So, people who have a hard time saying what they want, they're either they have a laundry list that's, 10 pages long of what they want, and it's not reality based, or they get emotional in one direction, say this is what I want, and then the next week they want to change that. So it's really part of what we do is psychology. It's talking through those things. Well, tell me what that means. Why do you really want to own this ski property? How often do you go? Well, we only go twice a year. Well, okay, what if you rented a B&B? Would that be the same? So we're managing through trying to understand. We want to get you what you want, right? What's the experience you want? What's the impact you want with what's going to be reasonable for your financial situation? That makes sense.
Well, listening, from my audience, I'd say most of my people that follow would be in the situation of going through it. What are your top tips for people that are just about to have to look at the money side? Maybe they've got their person now that they want to work with. What would you say are the key things that you would advise that is important for them to take away from this?
Okay. Well, the very first thing is don't give up too quickly, right? Have your team so you can lean on somebody like Sarah when you're feeling like, I just want this over. I just want to be done. I don't want you to leave money on the table. I'd rather you get it and then give it away if you want, but don't leave your proportional amount. You've been in this marriage. These are partly your assets. And then what I like to do, and the word spreadsheet might scare people, but it could be on the back of a napkin. But I like to have 3 different columns, right? I like to have us together. What's our income? What are our expenses? And then I like to see, what are mine? And then what does my future look like, right? So you can have perspective about what are needs and what are wants, right? We'd love to have everything. But when you're going through divorce, you're taking a 2-income household and you're splitting the income into 2 households, and then you're doubling all the expenses. I mean, it's it's big. So unless you had a rather enormous income and you lived below your means, the likelihood is you're going to have to make some adjustments, at least for a period of time.
So I like that. So I like the fact you look at what you need. So that's obviously, you need maybe a car to get to work. You need a home. You need, which means electrics, gas, water. You need, need to take whatever the children's costs in and all those kind of things. Wants nice things to have, like a new outfit every month, or the trip to wherever twice a year or whatever. So looking at those and trying to cut back. How do you manage that with people who are finding that hard? Because obviously that is going to be a tough point for a lot of people, right?
Sure, it can be tough for a happily married couple, right? You're just trying to manage and navigate your future. So I talk about what is your discretionary number. So when you look at your money, you have your income coming in, then you have your fixed expenses. That's your car, that's your kids, that's your health care, that's your house payment, the things you have to pay every month, right? And then you have what's left over. And if we do that, Sarah, we go through yours, you'll be like, wow, I have a lot of extra money. And I'll say, well, how much is in your checking account? And you say, not that much, right? Because we spend it more freely. I call it unconscious spending, right? So when we do that worksheet, you go, well, wow, I should have 3,000 extra euros a month. Where is that money? I only have 500, right? Well, we spend it on things. So I just like to have people be consciously aware of where they're spending that money. So if we've determined that you have $3,000 a month extra, and you say, well, Jennifer, I've got all these goals. I've got this goal, this goal, this goal. So, okay, well, what if we took 500 a month and put it aside for that goal? You'd have $6,000 at the end of the year, 6,000 euros. Then you would meet your goal. Wouldn't that feel good? And you're like, yes. So it's easier for you to then save $500 a month because you can consciously go, I really want to do this item. And so you won't go and spend extra money, or you won't, just overindulge on things that you can't really articulate where you spent them.
Yeah. I mean,
I think we all do that.
Do that, especially with social media. They seem to listen to what you're talking about, and then the outfit or the particular product for the kitchen that you've been talking about that you might need pops up in lots of different sizes and colors, thinking, oh, I did actually think I needed that. So it's quite easy, I think, to just click and Apple Pay, and then before you know it, you've spent more money. I mean, I think this is really good advice for people, because I think if we consciously are thinking and looking at the numbers, that's really important. One of the things I see a lot of my clients dealing with is they struggle to sit down and go through their budget for the month. That's something that a lot of people don't like to do, don't want to look at it, because if we look at it, then we're going to see the gap. And if we see the gap, then I'm going to feel even worse. And this divorce is going to feel even more destructive than it already is. And I'm already heartbroken. And then to realize in black and white, I am down £3,000 a month or whatever, then they're going to be like, oh my goodness. So a lot of people won't do it, and they don't like doing it, and it's not something they're comfortable with. So I think this is where clarity gives you power, is something I always say. Like, even if you don't like what you find, the fact that you've looked at it, the fact that you now know it's a $3,000 gap every month. Well, okay, now I can either put some money aside, or I can cut back, or I can find another revenue stream. I can do things differently, so I can, take my power back and actually manage that without living in fear. So I think seeing the numbers can be scary, but actually, would you agree it's actually the best thing to do?
I would absolutely agree with that. There's power in having that knowledge and that awareness. There's only two things that can improve your financial situation. You can spend more, you can spend less, or you can make more. That's it. Like, it's not that complicated. If you're overspending, you might need a less expensive car, a less expensive place to live, or you might need a better job, or to make more money, or, wait tables. I mean, growing up, my first job, I had a regular job during the week, and then I waited tables in the weekends because I needed that extra cash to live my life, to have fun, to have extra spending money. Most times I will say that, nobody likes the word budget. Nobody likes the idea of that exercise. If you strip it down and just say, focus on the discretion. How much do I have at my discretion? Which means you get to choose, right? So, okay, here's my income. Here's my fixed expenses. I have $500 left or 500 pounds left. Where do I want to spend my money? Well, if you just, don't pay any attention to it and you go out to lunch and you have a glass of wine and you do these things, you've already spent 1 week's worth of that extra money. Did you consciously think about what you wanted? If you did want that outfit, well, maybe you could save up over 2 months, a little bit of that money so that you could get it, right? Rather than putting on your credit card and then owing more money later.
I agree. I think it's consciously deciding what you want and taking your control back is absolutely key in all areas when you're going through a divorce. I think so much she feels out of control and so much feels it's being done to you and at you. And a lot of it is. However, if you live in that state, then you can never really feel at ease. What we've got to do is take our power back, and that helps us sleep better at night. Even if you don't like what you find, you can make a plan then with a financial planner, with a coach, to then go, okay, I know that I have a gap. That scares the hell out of me. But one of my options, as you say, there's two: spend less or make more money. So we have to work out how we do that. And I think a lot of people think when they're going through a divorce, whatever they get at the end of that, that is that, and that's how life is going to be. But obviously it's not. That's a snapshot in time at the end of your divorce where you have whatever the agreement is in the settlement. And then moving forward, you've got the whole rest of your life ahead of you to do things. Now, some people think, well, I've never worked before, I've never created an income before, or I'd like to have my own business, but I don't know how. But that's where working with specialists in those areas can really give you the how-to, step-by-step guide, so you can get those things going and actually turn around and go, look at what I've achieved. From very little to now having a steady income where I sleep easily at night and I can afford the things I want. But it does take planning, and planning needs clarity, and it needs somebody like you, Jennifer, to come on and say, this is what it's all about, and let's work through. Now, I know I've been obviously researching you and looking at what you do. I don't know what it's to do with a divorce or not, but I saw that you do something called writing your family financial love letter. What is a family financial love letter?
So a number of years ago, I started doing, even before I really dug in deep to transitional planning, I talked to people about writing their family love letter. And that could be to your spouse. It could be to your business partner. It could be to your kids. For me, I've got 9 nieces and nephews. So mine is to my partner and then to my nieces and nephews. And it's really about communicating a variety of things. One is your values and who you are as a certainly who they are to you, right? How important that relationship is and what that's meant to you. But it's also communicating your values around your assets and what you hope and want for them in their lives. So for me, since I'm the moneyed person and the financial person, my love letter talks about don't spend the principal, right? For whatever resources there are. If I'm not here, make sure that these are the people I trust, right? Make sure that you're living on the earnings from this asset rather than spending the principal, because then you'll always have money. It talks about things like, the interest rate on the mortgage is low. Don't pay off the mortgage, but you can use income from the asset to make sure that the mortgage is paid. It talks about, don't give chunks of money to the nieces and nephews, but teach them to fish, right? Give them money to start something that's going to allow them to grow and be successful on their own, because you want them to be able to generate their own livelihood ultimately, not just give them something and then maybe they spend it and it'll be gone. And then it talks about, what do you have in terms of resources? Where are the do you have cash somewhere in your house? What is your jewelry? What does it mean to you? I'm very fortunate. My aunt, who's 84 years old now, has probably 7 years or so ago started gifting me some of her jewelry, and it's wonderful. I mean, I love it. It's some of my most favorite items. So if you have those favorite items, then you want to say who you want them to go to, right? And what they mean to you, and communicate about those. And if you have young children, it's also talking about what you hope for them. Right? What do you hope for them about marriage? What do you hope for them about their career and their relationships? Do you want them to explore and be able to see the world and travel and have different perspectives? So it's communicating your essence and your values along with the money pieces.
I mean, I guess with a will, you're doing that. You're saying, this is what I'm leaving behind, and this is who I want it to go to. So are you talking about a will, like a legal binding document, but making it more personal, or is this something separate to that?
That's a very good question. This absolutely does not replace your will. Right. So you need those legal documents to transition assets like your real property, your house, your investment accounts, and so on. This is more your personal love letter to communicate how to use those things. So think, God forbid something happened to your spouse or a parent and there's just money, right? Or a house. How different is it if you have a love letter with that says, this is how special you are to me. And this is what, you're my oldest daughter, whatever it is. And here's what I hope for you in life, right? Here's, this house meant X, Y, and Z to me and your father. I hope that you'll be able to keep it or you'll sell it and use it for something in your life, whatever it is. It's just adding some personality and some uniqueness to your passing.
I think a lot of people don't think about that side of things when they're leaving or thinking about money. Think, well, that's quite a difficult subject and one we don't really, especially over here in Great Britain, we don't really talk about money too much, or it's very private for a lot of people here. So again, having that personal touch, so this is what it means to me, I think is really lovely. I like that idea a lot, Jennifer. So for people listening, where can they find more about you, Jennifer?
Sure. I have a website. It's modern, then a hyphen, and the word wealth. And I like to say, Sarah, that if people hopefully they got something interesting out of our call, but if they end up with a specific question that they want answered and I can help them, happy to do that on a Calendly invite. My Calendly is Jennifer Modern Wealth, and you can just click on it and get 15 minutes, no cost, no obligation, and we'll answer your question.
Great. So is that modern-wealth?
modern-wealth.com.
Yes,
sorry, yes.
Right, yeah, okay, brilliant. Yeah, because it's obviously over here in .co.uk and it could be .org, could be anything, so .com. Okay, fantastic.
.com.
All right, great. Well, thank you ever so much for joining us today. I have one final question, which I ask all my guests. My podcast is called Heartbreak to Happiness. And so we always ask, what is happiness for you, Jennifer?
Happiness for me is being invited by a niece or a nephew, which I recently was, to travel with them. So my niece Kate last year invited me to meet her she said anywhere. She was in Italy, so I met her in Spain, and then we traveled through Spain. We traveled through there, and then we went back to Italy, and that's really the juice in life for me, is having those special moments.
Quality time with the family. I love it. Brilliant. Well, thank you ever so much for coming on, Jennifer. It's been very helpful, very insightful. And thank you for being a fabulous guest.
Thanks for having me, Sarah.
That's it for today's episode. Do subscribe and follow so that you get the updates on everything we're doing with the podcast. And I look forward to you joining me next time.
That's it for today's episode of Heartbreak to Happiness. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review to win a free ticket to one of Sara's virtual retreats. The retreats are a transformative combination of live webinars with Sara herself, coupled with empowering online video programs designed to help you cope better with your breakup and start feeling happy again. For more details, head on over to heartbreaktohappinesspodcast.com, where you can also get a copy of Sara's free gift. Thank you, and join us again on the next episode for another dose of Heartbreak to Happiness.